In the summer of 1994, a 30-year-old Wall Street executive made a decision that everyone around him thought was absolutely insane. He quit his high-paying job at one of the most prestigious hedge funds in New York City, packed his belongings into the back of a Chevrolet Blazer, and asked his wife to drive while he typed out a business plan on his laptop in the passenger seat. They were heading west, toward Seattle, toward a future that no one could have predicted. That man was Jeff Bezos, and the company he was about to build in a cramped suburban garage would eventually become one of the most powerful corporations in the history of human civilization. Amazon. Today, Amazon is worth nearly $2 trillion. It employs over 1.5 million people worldwide. It has fundamentally changed the way we shop, the way we read, the way we watch movies, the way businesses operate, and even the way the internet itself functions. But none of this was inevitable. The story of Amazon is a story of relentless ambition, terrifying risk, years of brutal criticism, near-death experiences, and one man's obsessive belief that the internet would change everything. This is the story of how Jeff Bezos built Amazon from a garage to a trillion-dollar empire. To understand how Amazon came to exist, you first have to understand the mind that created it. Jeffrey Preston Jorgensen was born on January 12, 1964, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His mother, Jacqueline Guise, was just 17 years old when she had him. His biological father, Ted Jorgensen, was a circus performer and bike shop owner who struggled with responsibility. The marriage didn't last. When Jeff was just a toddler, his parents divorced, and his mother eventually remarried a Cuban immigrant named Miguel Bezos, who had come to the United States alone as a teenager through Operation Pedro Pan. Mike Bezos adopted young Jeff, gave him his last name, and raised him as his own son. Jeff wouldn't even learn the full details of his biological father until he was 10 years old. By all accounts, it didn't shake him. Mike Bezos was his father in every way that mattered. Jeff spent his summers on his maternal grandfather's ranch in Cotulla, Texas. His grandfather, Lawrence Preston Guise, was a retired regional director of the United States Atomic Energy Commission. He was a man of extraordinary skill. On that ranch, young Jeff learned to fix windmills, vaccinate cattle, repair broken equipment, and solve problems with whatever tools were available. Years later, Bezos would credit those summers on the ranch as one of the most formative experiences of his life. He learned that resourcefulness was more important than resources. From an early age, Jeff showed signs of intense intellectual curiosity and an almost stubborn determination. As a toddler, he reportedly tried to disassemble his own crib with a screwdriver. In high school, in Miami, he was valedictorian of his class, a National Merit Scholar, and a Silver Knight Award winner. He gave a graduation speech in which he talked about colonizing space and turning Earth into a nature preserve. His classmates probably thought he was dreaming. Was not. Bezos went to Princeton University, originally intending to study physics. He wanted to be a theoretical physicist, but somewhere along the way, he realized he didn't have the raw genius to be in the top 50 physicists in the world, and he didn't want to be mediocre at anything. So he switched to computer science and electrical engineering, graduating summa cum laude in 1980. After Princeton, Bezos didn't head to Silicon Valley like many of his peers. Instead, he went to Wall Street. He worked at several firms before landing at D.E. Shaw and Company, a highly secretive and quantitative hedge fund run by David E. Shaw, a former computer science professor. Shaw's firm was at the cutting edge of using computational algorithms to find market inefficiencies. Bezos thrived there. By the age of 30, he had become the youngest senior vice president in the firm's history. He was making a very comfortable living. He had a great apartment in Manhattan. He had a beautiful wife, Mackenzie Tatel, whom he had met at D Show and married in 19. Life was good. And then he saw a number that changed everything. In early 1994, Jeff Bezos came across a statistic that stopped him in his tracks. Web usage was growing at 2,300% per year. Let that sink in. 2,300%. Year over year. Bezos had never seen a growth rate like that for anything in any industry, ever. He immediately understood that something massive was happening. The internet was not a fad. It was a revolution, and Bezos wanted to be part of it. He didn't know exactly what kind of business to build, so he did what any analytical mind would do. He made a list. He sat down and created a list of 20 different product categories that could potentially be sold online. The list included things like software, office supplies, apparel, music, and many others. After careful analysis, he narrowed it down to the one product that he believed was the single best candidate for online retail: books. Why books? Because of several very specific reasons that reveal how Bezos thinks. First, there were more individual items in the book category than in any other category. At the time, there were over 3 million books in print worldwide. No physical bookstore, no matter how large, could carry more than a tiny fraction of that inventory. The biggest bookstores in the world might carry 150,000 titles. But an online bookstore could theoretically offer every single book ever published. Second, books were a commodity product. A copy of a specific book was exactly the same no matter where you bought it, which meant customers didn't need to physically inspect the product before purchasing. Third, the two major book wholesalers, Ingram and Baker and Taylor, already had electronic catalogs, which meant Bezos could access their inventory databases digitally. And fourth, books were relatively inexpensive, lightweight, and easy to ship, which reduced the risk for both the seller and the buyer. Bezos took his idea to his boss, David Shaw. Shaw listened patiently and told Bezos it was a really good idea, but it was a better idea for someone who didn't already have a great job. That comment didn't discourage Bezos. Instead, he used a mental framework that he has talked about many times since. He calls it the regret minimization framework. He imagined himself at age 80, looking back on his life. Would he regret leaving a well-paying Wall Street job to try to sell books on the internet? No. Would he regret not participating in something he believed was going to be revolutionary? Absolutely yes. The decision became easy. He told Mackenzie he wanted to quit his job and start an internet company. She didn't hesitate. Her response, as Bezos later recalled, was simple and immediate. Let's go. Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos flew to Fort Worth, Texas, borrowed money from Jeff's parents, and then began the drive to Seattle. Jeff chose Seattle for two strategic reasons. First, it was close to one of the largest book distribution warehouses in the country, operated by Ingram, located in Roseburg, Oregon. Second, Washington State had a relatively small population, which meant Bezos would have to collect sales tax from fewer customers compared to locating in a larger state like California or New York. Even in the very first days, Bezos was thinking about competitive advantages at a granular level. They rented a house in Bellevue, a suburb of Seattle, and Jeff set up shop in the garage. This was not a metaphorical garage. This was an actual, literal, two-car garage with a pot-bellied stove for heat. Bezos and a small team of early employees, including Shel Cafone, who became Amazon's first programmer, built desks out of old wooden doors purchased from Home Depot with 4x4 lumber posts as legs. Those door desks became a symbol of Amazon's culture of frugality. And the company still gives out a Door Desk Award to employees who demonstrate cost-saving innovations. In those early months, the small team worked grueling hours writing code, building the website, and testing the platform. Originally, Bezos wanted to name the company Cadabra, as in abracadabra, the magic word, but his lawyer misheard it as cadaver over the phone and told him that was a terrible name. Bezos went back to brainstorming. He looked through the dictionary, starting with the letter A, because he wanted the company to appear near the top of alphabetical listings, which were common on early internet directories. He landed on Amazon, named after the Amazon River, the largest river in the world by volume. He liked the metaphor. He wanted to build the largest store in the world. On July 16th, 1995, Amazon.com went live. It sold its first book to a customer named John Wainwright. The book was called Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies by Douglas Huck. In the very first week, Amazon received orders from all 50 states and 45 different countries. The team was shocked. They hadn't done almost any marketing. The orders were coming in through word of mouth and early internet communities. Within the first 30 days, Amazon had sold books to customers in every state and in over 40 countries. Bezos and his small team were packing and shipping books themselves, often working on their hands and knees on the garage floor. At one point, Bezos remarked that they really needed to get knee pads. One of his employees made the far more practical suggestion that they should get packing tables. Bezos later said it was the smartest idea he had heard in his life. Amazon's growth was nothing short of staggering. In its first full year of operation, 1996, Amazon generated $511,000 in revenue. By 1997, that number had exploded to $148 million. The growth rate was almost incomprehensible. In May of 1990s, Bezos took Amazon public on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange at an initial offering price of $18 per share. In his very first letter to shareholders, Bezos wrote something that would define Amazon's strategy for the next 3 decades. He said, "This is day one." He explained that Amazon would prioritize long-term market leadership over short-term profitability. He warned investors that the company would make bold bets, that many of those bets would fail, and that the company would operate at a loss for the foreseeable future because it would reinvest every dollar back into growth. This was not what Wall Street wanted to hear, but Bezos didn't care. From the beginning, Bezos was obsessed with customer experience. He made decisions that were counterintuitive and sometimes infuriated his business partners. For example, he introduced customer reviews on the Amazon website, allowing anyone to post a review of any product, including negative reviews. Publishers were furious. They called Bezos and demanded to know why he was allowing people to criticize their books on his website. Bezos responded by saying that Amazon's goal was not to sell things. Amazon's goal was to help customers make purchasing decisions. If a negative review helped a customer make a better decision, then that was good for the customer. And what was good for the customer was ultimately good for Amazon. Customer obsession philosophy became the foundational principle of everything Amazon would build. By the late 1990s, Bezos began expanding Amazon beyond books. The company started selling music, then DVDs, then electronics, then toys, then almost everything. Wall Street analysts and traditional retailers mocked the strategy. They called Amazon Amazon.bomb. The famous Barron's magazine cover story in 1999 was titled Amazon.bomb and predicted the company would run out of money. Many experts openly predicted that Amazon would be one of the most spectacular failures of the dot-com era. And then the dot-com bubble actually burst. The dot-com crash of 2000 and 2001 was an extinctional event for internet companies. Hundreds of once hyped startups vanished overnight. Pets.com, Webvin, eToys, Cosmo, and countless others burned through their cash and disappeared. Amazon's stock price collapsed. It fell from a high of over $100 per share down to just $6 per share. More than 90% of its market value was wiped out. Inside the company, morale was shaken. Outside the company, the vultures were circling, Analysts issued report after report predicting Amazon's imminent bankruptcy. Lehman Brothers analyst Ravi Surya published a widely read report arguing that Amazon was running out of cash and would default on its debt. Bezos, however, remained calm, almost eerily calm. He told his employees that the stock price had nothing to do with the quality of the company they were building. He reminded them that the stock price measures what the market thinks about you today, but what matters is what you're actually building for customers. During this period, Bezos made a crucial decision that may have saved the company. In early 2000, just before the crash hit its worst point, Amazon raised $672 million in convertible bonds from European investors. That cash cushion gave Amazon the runway it needed to survive while its competitors died. It was a matter of timing and foresight. If Bezos had waited even a few months longer to raise that capital, the window would have closed, and Amazon might not exist today. Bezos also used the crisis to cut costs ruthlessly. He closed customer service centers, laid off hundreds of employees, and shut down unprofitable business lines. But critically, he never cut investment in technology and infrastructure. He understood that when the recovery came, the companies that had continued to invest in their core capabilities would be the ones that emerged stronger. Was right. Amazon reported its first quarterly profit in the fourth quarter of 2001. It was a tiny profit, just $5 million on over $1 billion in revenue. But it was enough to silence the doubters, at least temporarily. What separates Amazon from other successful companies is not just its ability to survive, but its relentless, almost compulsive drive to invent new things. After surviving the dot-com crash, Bezos didn't play it safe. He doubled down on innovation. And the innovations that followed are what transformed Amazon from a large online retailer into something entirely different, something unprecedented. The first game changer was Amazon Prime. Launched in February 2005, Prime offered customers unlimited free 2-day shipping for an annual fee of $79. At the time, most people inside and outside the company thought Bezos had lost his mind. The cost of 2-day shipping was enormous, and charging customers just $79 a year couldn't possibly cover it. Analysts estimated that Amazon was losing money on every single Prime member. But Bezos understood something that others didn't. Prime wasn't a shipping program. Prime was a loyalty program disguised as a shipping program. Once customers paid that annual fee, they felt compelled to order more from Amazon to justify the cost. And the more they ordered, the more habitual Amazon became in their daily lives. Today, Amazon Prime has over 200 million subscribers worldwide, and Prime members spend on average roughly 2.5 times more than non-Prime members. It may be the single most successful customer loyalty program in the history of business. The second transformative innovation was Amazon Web Services, or ABOC. This one is harder to explain, but arguably even more important than Prime. In the early 2000s, Amazon's internal engineering teams were spending too much time building and rebuilding the same basic computing infrastructure for every new project. Bezos and his technical leadership team realized that if they standardized and modularized this infrastructure, they could not only serve their own internal needs more efficiently, but also offer that computing power to outside companies as a service. AWS launched publicly in 2006, offering cloud computing services, essentially renting out computing power, storage, and databases over the internet. Many people were confused. Why was a bookstore selling computing power? But Bezos saw what others missed. AWS grew to become the dominant cloud computing platform in the world. Today, AWS generates over $90 billion in annual revenue and is by far Amazon's most profitable division. It powers a staggering portion of the internet. Netflix, NASA, the CIA, major banks, startups, and millions of other organizations run on AWS. When people say Amazon is not just a retail company, AWS is the primary reason why. The third major invention was the Kindle, launched in November 2007. Bezos personally oversaw the development of the Kindle, and he gave the hardware team a radical directive. He told them that their job was to make the physical book obsolete, including the physical books that Amazon itself was selling. He wanted the team to cannibalize Amazon's own business. This willingness to disrupt yourself before someone else does is a hallmark of Bezos' thinking. The Kindle transformed the publishing industry and established Amazon as the dominant force in digital books. Then came Alexa and the Echo smart speaker in 2014, which brought Amazon's presence into people's living rooms and kitchens. Then came Amazon's aggressive push into original content with Amazon Studios, producing award-winning shows and movies. Then came the acquisition of Whole Foods in 2017 for $13.7 billion, signaling Amazon's serious entry into physical grocery retail. Each of these moves was criticized when it was announced, and each of them proved to be strategically brilliant. No honest documentary about Amazon can ignore the controversies. Amazon's workplace culture has been the subject of intense scrutiny and criticism for years. In 2015, the New York Times published a sweeping investigative article describing Amazon's corporate offices as a bruising workplace where employees were encouraged to tear apart each other's ideas, where working late nights and weekends was the norm, and where the company's 14 leadership principles were used as both inspiration and weapon. Bezos pushed back against the characterization, saying it didn't describe the Amazon he knew. But the article resonated with many current and former employees who shared similar experiences. The conditions in Amazon's fulfillment centers have also drawn significant criticism. Workers have reported grueling physical demands, intense surveillance, strict productivity quotas, and limited bathroom breaks. Multiple investigations and reports have documented injury rates in Amazon warehouses that are significantly higher than the industry average. Labor unions and advocacy groups have repeatedly called on Amazon to improve conditions and raise wages. In 2018, after sustained public pressure, including criticism from Senator Bernie Sanders, Amazon raised its minimum wage to $15 per hour for all U.S. employees. Bezos framed it as the right thing to do, but critics argued it was long overdue. Amazon has also faced antitrust scrutiny from governments around the world. The Federal Trade Commission and the European Commission have both investigated Amazon's practices, including allegations that Amazon uses data from third-party sellers on its platform to develop competing products, that it gives preferential treatment to its own brands in search results, and that its sheer size and market power constitute a monopoly that harms competition. In 2023, the FTC filed a landmark antitrust lawsuit against Amazon, alleging that the company illegally maintains monopoly power. Amazon has denied the allegations and is fighting the case. The outcome of this legal battle could reshape the company and the broader tech industry. On July 5, 2021, Jeff Bezos officially stepped down as CEO of Amazon, handing the role to Andy Jassy, the longtime head of it. Bezos transitioned to the role of executive chairman, saying he wanted to focus his energy on other ventures, including Blue Origin, his space exploration company, the Bezos Earth Fund, a $10 billion commitment to fight climate change, and the Washington Post, which he purchased in 2013 for $250 million. By the time Bezos stepped down, Amazon had approximately 1.5 million employees, annual revenues exceeding $469 billion, and a market capitalization that had crossed the $1 trillion mark for the first time in September of 2018. Jeff Bezos himself became the wealthiest person in the world, with a net worth that at its peak exceeded $200 billion. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Amazon story is not the money or the market cap. It is the sheer scope of transformation. In just over 25 years, a man working in a garage with door desks and a handful of employees built a company that fundamentally altered the global economy. Amazon changed how we buy things, how we read, how we watch entertainment, how companies build and deploy technology, how goods are delivered, and even how we think about convenience itself. Whether you admire Jeff Bezos or criticize him, whether you love Amazon or worry about its power, one thing is undeniable. The story of Amazon is one of the most extraordinary business stories ever told. It is a story about what happens when relentless customer obsession meets long-term thinking, when bold invention meets disciplined execution, and when one person's refusal to accept the status quo reshapes the world. Jeff Bezos still begins every annual letter to shareholders the same way he ended his first one in 1997, with 2 words: Day 1. Because in the world of Jeff Bezos, the moment you start thinking it's day 2 is the moment you start dying. If this story inspired you, if it made you think differently about ambition, risk, and what's possible, consider subscribing to this channel. We tell the stories behind the world's most extraordinary companies and the people who built them. Until next time, remember, it is always day 1.